Well, Chapter 3 is Specialized Instruction and Technology. And they do a pretty good job here on instruction, not as good on technology. And what I like most about this is it really is going to teach you what separates you from the general classroom teacher. And if there isn't a difference, then we don't need you. One of the things that I ask student teachers is, how are you different than what they're doing in the regular classroom? Let me tell you like this. You go, the student is struggling in class, let's say a third grader, and the student is struggling in reading, and they want extra help, but the student is classified as having a specific learning disability, and they're going to spend 20 minutes a day with you. You better be able to verbalize a handful of things that make your instruction different than in the regular classroom. And unfortunately, from time to time I've observed they do exactly the same thing they do in the regular classroom. The other thing this chapter does a little bit is bring together some of the things from RTI and some of the other things we've studied. And so it really starts to bring it together. But the biggest thing is, what do we do different in special ed than they do in the regular classroom? All right, so this is what it looks like. A thing on specialized instruction, and then this differentiated instruction with modifications, which is a regular classroom thing. Clinical teaching, then here's the differentiated instruction, controlling instructional variables, and I'll ask you to do that. And here's the thing with these things on modification and related and accommodations especially. We're going to assume when you walk across our stage and have that certificate, that graduation certificate or diploma in your hand, and the state of South Dakota and the other states hand you a teaching certificate in special ed, we're going to assume you have some expertise in this area of accommodating and modifying. And this chapter spends most of their time on accommodating. Okay. And then accommodations for different learning things, effective instructional strategies, and then a task analysis. And you've had that before, but we'll take a look at it a little bit as an instructional tool, academic instruction, and then some on technology I'm not going to do a lot with. So let's hit it here on specialized instruction. The images, again, there's those teaching portions and assessments, okay, and technology. Specialized instruction. So what is specialized instruction? And this is another thing that you would be wise to be able to verbalize. This is the kind of thing, there's several terms in here that could come up in an interview that hopefully you have some verbiage to verbalize what it is. So I pop this up, says, especially designed to meet the needs of the individual student, and the instruction is based on specific strengths and deficits that the student exhibit. Okay, so it's very specific of what it is. Okay, in the general classroom, generally it's a one-size-fits-all, but in their special ed classroom, it better address a number of other things, because here many students this multi-sensory approach. And we've had that before. That kind of thinking is multisensory, meaning you're touching on different senses. Interesting gender bias here, but as you know, 2/3 of students with specific learning disabilities are male. Okay, because it has poor auditory and visual skills, another may need to be taught a specific learning strategy. So this is what you're tasked with. This is what you're charged with. Is figuring these things out. One student may need a fading approach. Okay, there's math facts. Another student may need preparing for a job in a laundromat. Depends on what it is. And this is pretty self-explanatory here of this. Specialized instruction, differentiated, and then these accommodations, modifications. So first of all, differentiate instruction from accommodations and modifications. Oftentimes we hear individuals discussing, and I'm going to read some of this to you just because I want this verbiage. Accommodations, modifications of student needs, okay? Child may need to read this. Student must also be taught to read in a specialized way. So it's not enough just to give them stuff to get through it, but also teach them to be successful. Now, I'm going to disagree with Dr. Lerner here a little bit, because I think the most important thing is that they do learn to support themselves with these other things, but she's still contending that they learn to read. And by the time they get to upper elementary, sometimes it becomes much more important to shift to that they can support themselves in other ways. Specialized instruction, provide a credential, a special ed teacher. Special ed must include remediation of the disability. And that's what Dr. Lerner says. It can't be just enough that they can get through an assignment, get through a subject, get through a grade, but to remediate whatever the weakness is, and that's what we do as special ed teachers. In this case, the students cannot read. Students must be taught to read in a way that is appropriate for them. And again, this may be with technology or something like that. Student must be also taught compensatory strategies. And this is where I fall more, especially by the time we get to upper middle school. How to compensate. For example, here's one way to compensate. I block this. And I hit the little link here, read text.
Oftentimes we hear individuals discussing the accommodations and modifications of student needs. If the child cannot read, we may provide them with someone who can read the material to them.
Okay, so this is where I think we're behind. I thought by now every book in the schools would be digitized like this one, and every single one would have a reader built in. And this is the Mind Tap that comes with this electronic version, and it has the reader built in. I'm surprised that as long as we've had technology, as long as students have already had one-to-one and had laptops and iPads in their hands, I cannot believe that this isn't everything they do doesn't have this. Now, don't get me wrong, because I get myself wrong, but that isn't the serve all, that isn't the kill all, that isn't the magic. It's another tool, because one of the things you're going to work with kids continuously is just lower functioning kids that can't handle that much information. And so you'll still have to organize them, you'll still have to modify and accommodate, but there's some students that would benefit from simply having the reader that would read to them. And of course, it's kind of universal, because you and I would like it too. Wouldn't you like to have that thing read to you? And one of the problems I have with readers sometimes is correcting the speed to how fast I want to go. But that's what's universal, because it's not only good for kids with reading difficulties. A lot of us like it too. And so that's what that is. Okay. Let me find some more here. Place within the differentiated is in the general classroom. Don't forget that. Involves classroom teacher using techniques that are designed to meet the range of diversity of the thing. And so there's different levels, and we had that a little bit like RTI, the different levels. That's what it is you can work to this level or to this level or the highest level depending on your ability. And then these accommodations modifications are to assist those students. Accommodations discussed later. Here's the thing, and this is you have to know this. Accommodations do not change content. Modifications, on the other hand, change the content and the material being learned. So let me give it to you again. Accommodations do not change the content. Modification does. And let me take it one step down for you. Accommodations does not change the rigor. Does not change how much and how hard it is. Modifications, you can change the rigor. You can change how hard it is. Okay. I thought I had that over here. Right here. I want this to be number 1, where you right. What is the difference? You give a definition of both. The difference between accommodation and modification, right there. I'm going to back up here. Specialized instruction designed to meet the unique needs of the individual student, and that's you doing that. And so what is special about special education? Based on a thorough assessment and then example of specialized instruction. Okay, so I'm going to call this number 2 here. Give an example of specialized instruction different than in the regular classroom. And then I'm already here, so I'm going to move up here of Kirk's diagnostic prescriptive approach for this. Here they are, Kirk's diagnostic approach. Kirk says first assessment, and then determination of the focus of instruction, decision of how the instruction be delivered, how, and then measurement of the child's progress. Okay, so that's what makes it special to Kirk, and Kirk is a special ed guru for a long time, and has published many things. So clinical teaching. Then we move on to clinical teaching. Teacher who tailors the learning experience for the unique needs of the student. Teacher who is enthusiastic, sensitive, optimistic. Teacher who is serious about student learning. That's the clinical teacher. Special kind of teaching that is required to help students who encounter difficulty is clinical. And I'm going to click that up for you. Tailors the learning experience to the unique needs of an individual learner. Okay, and that's you. And again, this is a term I had at a job interview years back of what is clinical teaching and do you know how to do it? Okay, so again, you as our special ed teacher, we want you to have some verbiage. What the heck is clinical teaching? And can you do clinical teaching? Okay, so what is it? As we had here. That's these things. And this is the verbiage you want here. The goal of clinical teaching is to tailor learning experiences for the unique needs of an individual student. You're going to use the information you gather, all the things we talked about in assessment, to make a classification. A lot of that you bring forward now is to serving the student. The clinical teacher modifies the teaching as new needs become apparent for the student. Okay. Right here. Clinical teaching can be viewed as a cycle. The student is evaluated, and then a unit of work based on the evaluation is taught. After teaching the student again, thank you, Mr. Special Ed teacher, evaluated to determine what has been learned. So here is what I want you to write here. 5 stages of it. Assessment, planning, implementation of that plan, evaluate, and then modify assessment. So here's what I'm having you write, number 3. And this is what my professor said almost 30 years ago when I studied this. Test, teach, test, teach, test, teach. That you're constantly probing to see if we're gaining. So like we talked about last time, If you're teaching a kid to speed up reading, you want their reading speed to increase, you want to regularly be giving assessments to see if that's improving. I'm going to say daily. The textbook last one said weekly. I'm saying part of your instruction every day better be a passage assessment to see if we're improving speed. And you're graphing and tracking that data. That's what clinical teaching is. Okay. And here's this, a little thing. This is right here. And I'm going to make this, this was number 3. This is number 4. Okay. And you just paraphrase right in from here over to here. Okay, thank you. Now, qualities of clinical teaching. And again, I brought these in, and again, you're going to paraphrase these and bring them over here. This will be number 5. And again, well, one line, what each of these are, and I'll look at them with you before you start. Clinical teaching is a decision maker. Lessons in the general ed classroom usually designed to entire class. Clinical teaching is accomplished in a variety of settings, occur in a group or individual settings. So there's those. That's what clinical teaching is. All right, differentiated instruction. Differentiated instruction. Have you heard that term? It's a big buzz the last 5 to 7, maybe 10 years. And so again, when you carry around this certification as a teacher, whether you're a special ed teacher or the regular classroom teacher or a high school math teacher, there will be an assumption that you have an understanding of what differentiated instruction is. And what it is, it reflects the philosophy of teaching and enables teachers to reach unique needs of students, capitalize students' strengths and weaknesses. Differentiated instruction embodies the qualities of clinical teaching by giving students multiple options for taking information and making sense of the idea. Again, multiple options for taking in information and making sense of it. One of the biggest mistakes we make in teaching is treat everyone equally when it becomes learning. By recognizing all students are not alike, differentiated instruction applies an approach to that. Okay. Again, this is a regular classroom strategy, but you need to understand it in order to support it. Differentiated instruction takes individual needs into account when teaching by responding to each student's personal talents, interests, I'm going to highlight this for you, knowledge, and distinct experiences. And the big thing is, like it says up here, it allows for a choice, multiple options. And this is what I think is the success of it, is that they have a choice. In differentiated instruction, the teacher seeks to find that special method that will be successful for an individual student to help the student learn. Let me just go out here and see. This universal design of learning that I talked about, meaning that it can be for kids with learning problems or regular kids, but it's a benefit to everyone. Let me just see if I can make a word picture here. The thing about a choice and looking for this unique learning style in different instruction is where you may do this. You may let them draw, write, build, sing, act out. You allow students to use different learning and output things than just one size fits all. That's what this is all about. Choice, differentiated instruction. Taking information and making sense. Students, this you have give one, and let's see, we are on number 6 here. You come up with one way of differentiating instruction. First of all, tell me if you've already heard this or have any experience with this. Let's do it this way for number 6. You tell me 3 different ways you could allow a student to demonstrate their knowledge of spelling. You tell me 3 different ways you could allow a student to demonstrate their knowledge in spelling. Here's another thing. I used to do a better job of this in the foundations class, talking about multiple intelligence. But this is Gardner's work, and it's been around for quite a while. Multiple intelligence is many different talents or intelligence, such as verbal, linguistic intelligence, or visual or spatial intelligence. And so it's kind of fell off the radar. Gardner came up with this 30-some years ago, and it was the craze at the time. But again, I want you to do a few things, and here they are, and I'm going to put this up for you to put on your website. But Gardner's multiple intelligence, and here they are. And so I want you to just look through them now. And here's the big list. You don't need to write all these in, but I'm going to have you do something a little different, and that is this. I'm going to take you out of this link here. And this is, you're going to do your own assessment. So there is, you respond based on these things here. And there's 56 of them, and it took me just a couple minutes. And then you submit it, and it'll give you a report. And then you'll come back here for number 7. For number 7 here, and you'll tell me a little report of what your strengths were based on these. And it'll give you like your top 3 here. And so you'll come back and you'll talk about these from that on multiple intelligences. And then will you also here, as part of number 7, talk about how you would use this in your instruction on a child that is having some difficulty. Because largely these things are ignored in our classrooms today. And if you have knowledge different, please mention that also. But make that red for me. I want to hear from you on this. Okay. Then this differentiated instruction and teaching approaches takes you through this. And this cognitive processing. And I have this here. And I just want you to do this, what this means here. And so this will be number 8. And again, paraphrase, one line on each of these, what they are and what they have to do with anything. Of this cognitive process. And then we get into this direct instruction and mastery. We talked about this a little bit, but these words are somewhat interchangeable. But this student practices and repeats each step along the way. Again, do you have any experience with direct instruction, mastery learning? This is another thing that could easily come up in a job interview. This is another thing that We expect special ed teachers have some verbiage, have some jargon, can talk about these things, what they are, but they're a little bit interchangeable. And what I'm going to do, I have this stuff here. And you don't need to do much with this, but what I want you to do is come down to these links. This one first, and this is a video, and this guy does a pretty nice job of explaining the difference and explaining mastery learning and direct instruction.
Wanna play?
And you have to click out of these ads quite often. So you got this guy. And then I want you to come back here, and this is the one I really want you to see, and this is a modeling of direct instruction. So if you have not seen direct instruction, please view this if you have.
What words? What words?
Okay, so this is number, sorry, I keep forgetting, 9. You're going to view these two, and then you're going to tell me what they're teaching, what this nice lady's modeling here, and what you think you would teach with this. But view that 9-minute video and then respond to that. Okay. Instructional variables, controlling instructional variables. A teacher in a school can do relatively little about many factors linked to learning disabilities, but we can do this. The home environment and the genetic biological makeup are the biggest keys, but here's the ones you can deal with. Is teachers are this here, difficulty level, space, time, and language. So that's how we're going to look at this. And I'm just going to give these to you: difficulty, space, time, and language. And I'm going to let you look at these and respond in an adequate way. Okay. Here's this one: difficulty level, space, time, and language. All right. And here they are. And this is number 10. And you're going to respond to those as what role they will play and your understanding of what this means in the world of accommodations. And the textbook does a pretty nice job on it. Move on to building self-esteem. Can I read this to you? Robert Louis Stevenson observed that life is not so much a matter of holding good cards, but of playing the poor hand well. And this observation expressed the plight of students with learning disabilities and related mild disabilities, and the call for teachers to help students learn how to play their hand well. And that's you. Clinical teaching requires an affirming, I'm going to go ahead and put this down, affirming and positive student-teacher relationship, not a given. In fact, one of the biggest challenges you'll have is you're going to run up against students that you're challenged in this area. Some of the more difficult students I had were really a challenge to like. And so when you see that, often we say, well, of course we're going to like these. Of course we're going to have this budding, affirming, positive relationship. Not a given. Although effective teachers require objectively through the knowledge and curriculum and skills, also requires subjective understandings of the students and individuals with feelings, emotions, hopes, and dreams. And this group needs more than the regular classroom kids. And here's the thing, and we don't tell you this, it's kind of a secret we keep from you, but often, most of these kids are troubled kids. And what we can't decide, did the trouble come first or did the learning disability come first? But it goes back to socioeconomic class and divide, and you don't get to change that. But you're going to work with kids that have given up. And here in this yellow here, because they have suffered years of despair, discouragement, and frustration. That's what you get. That's what you get. Versus in the regular classroom, most case, students come with the exact opposite feeling. That the Fegan boys would go to school, they didn't have a feeling of despair, discouragement, and frustration. So for the most part, they are ready to learn each day. Okay, so what goes with that? Well, they can experience feelings of rejection, failure, hopelessness, those things. And what's harder is they don't connect emotionally. So they have a hard time making friends. One of the highlights for most of us in school was the friendships. Now, can you imagine if you're not making friends in school? Oh, you know what's even scarier? What if you, as the special ed teacher, are the only friend they have? Here's a story about that may serve you well. So here are these things. Self-esteem, fostering motivation, building rapport. Again, I'm going to give you these. This is number 11. And you are going to bring in some paraphrasing about each of these. For example, on self-esteem, parents wonder whether the child is able to learn or just plain lazy. Can you imagine that? Would you like to live with that? I got to admit, I've had some of that with my youngest son when he's not doing as well as I think he should be in school. And my first thought is, oh, maybe he's lazy. Even though most loving parents become so alarmed with their child's inability to learn, they will tend to punish, scold, threaten, or even reward with hope that they'll get the results they want. All right, and you could easily have parents that are indifferent. And here's the saddest thing, and this is what it's going to affect you also, is that these feelings tend to pervade every aspect of their life. Okay, self-esteem. And then you'll write something about fostering motivation. And this is Rick Lavoie, who put that thing together that we had at the beginning of the course in the intro about how hard can this be. And he writes about this. These are the things you need to enjoy school right here. So you want to bring that in. And then building rapport, and this is for you. Good relations between the teacher and the student is an essential first step in this. Good luck with that. Because for the most part, and a lot of you that get into being a special ed teacher are prepared for this. And be prepared for building rapport with students. But I'm saying it's going to stretch you ways you didn't know possible. So you'll write about that. And then sharing responsibility. Can they have an active role in designing their learning? And providing structure, establish routines and important factors in school. But what you're going to work with, like I did, is students that have never had routine. Like here, I was older when I had my kids. I was fanatical about their bedtime and breakfast time and routines and processes and feeding them and sitting down, and everything to me was about routine. And I'm not so sure it was for me or for them as much as it was for me. But when my kids went to school, they were well prepared for structure and routine. Here's another thing with a lot of our kids with learning disability. They've never had that. And they cry out they need structure and routine more than the other kids. And so they've had less, and they're not trained in that way. So can you help provide that? Then conveying sincerity, like minimize anxiety about errors on their work. And then showing success and capitalizing on their interests. And that takes you through this. Now, how about including students with learning disabilities and related disabilities in general classroom? So the first thing they do is bark off here a bunch of statistics. And I'm going to call this number 12, this whole page, but you bring some of the statistics about where students are served. Okay, and they're right here. And then this 504. And again, if you've been in this classroom, you've been in schools at all, unless you were sound asleep, you've heard this term, a 504. Okay, and this is what 504 I highlighted here is an accommodation plan that outlines the specific accommodations that are needed for the student. 504 students will not have an IEP, but they have a 504. And so that's a much easier sell. You remember when I whined on the chapter about assessment, about how hard it was to qualify kids because of how wide that gap was in the discrepancy model? This supposedly is the solution. It allows the student to have these accommodations, not modification. If you're on a 504 plan, you're not to change the rigor, but you can change ways that they take in the information or manage the things. And they call it this. It has to be reasonable accommodations. Now, let me say this, folks. This is not your problem as a special ed teacher. You really are not to run 504s. You are not to implement them. You're not to really even know much about them. You may be kind of a resource person, but don't get locked into running these in your school or even in your classroom or things like that. This is a special ed thing. Can I just tell you another thing? You really can make accommodations for any kid, even if they don't have a 504 plan. It doesn't have to be written down. You can allow kids to learn and access and do things differently. We kind of scare you into thinking, oh, it all has to be the same. But this reminds me of differential. This reminds me of effective teaching. Giving kids what they need. If they need to use the computer, if they need the screen reader, if they need longer time, if they need any of those things that you study, give it to them. Let them be successful. So that's 504. You're going to write a little bit about what that is as part of number 12. And then this diversity in the classroom. This is a lot about these second languages. Language is an obvious consideration. There's a lot of other variables. I think, a student comes. Well, I disagree with the common knowledge. Right? Let me tell you what I disagree. And these are the kinds of things that get me in trouble. But I think we way overplay this. I think people that come to this country and put their kids in our schools want them to learn English. They enjoy their native language, but they do not come to this country and put their kids in public schools to be taught in their native languages. Nobody agrees with me on that, but that's what I think. And so language will be a barrier, but check me on this. these parents, even though they can't speak English, that's why they came to this country, so that their kids could learn English. So language is a big one, but a bigger barrier for you will be income levels, class. These kids that come from generational poverty will create more challenges for you than kids that don't speak the English. Because for the most part, kids that come to this country new that don't speak the English have supportive parents and supportive homes. So that's what I want you to put here, and this is still with number 12, is some statements about student diversity in the classrooms. All right. And move on to these accommodations for students with disabilities. So accommodations will help students with learning disabilities and related disabilities in the general classroom. And here's how. Right here. Okay. So first of all, I want you to go back and tell me the difference. And this is number 13. We already did this. What is the difference between accommodations and modifications? I want you to bring that here again. What is the difference between those things? Okay. And then also, I'm going to change this up to number 14 for you right below here. These 4 things for the general classroom right here. Increase attention in the general classroom, improve the ability to listen, adapt the curriculum in the general classroom, and help students manage time. Sounds simple. I assure you it is not. Now we see so much more of you in the regular classroom that this will be even more of a glaring need. And here's the thing, again, just because you're a special ed teacher, believe me, there are going to be a lot of kids in the classroom that need support in these same areas, and you can provide that. And that, everybody's still a little nervous exactly what that should look like, but I'm saying work with all the kids, not just 1 or 2. Okay. And increase attention, and I'm going to give you this. That's from the first one. Content remains the same, but student is provided tools to show that he knows the content. So here's the things. You can change the settings, change the scheduling, change the type of presentation, change expectations for responses. Those are accommodations. This is number 15. And just paraphrase these again. What about changing the setting, changing the scheduling, changing the type of presentation, and expectations for responses? This is easy stuff. This is where you can quickly be successful in that regular classroom. There's improving ability to listen, adapting the curriculum, and it's right here on this page here how you can do that. Okay, and then this will be number 16. And again, this is a wheelhouse thing that hopefully you can get up to speed real quick on in the regular classroom, and that's this: how to increase their attention, improve their ability to listen, adapt the curriculum, and help students manage time. And again, this will be for all kids in that class. This isn't something you're doing in the special ed room. This is for the regular classroom. Because when you're there in a special ed classroom, you or a teacher's aide are going to work very directly with them, very intensely, doing your clinical instruction. In the regular classroom, that's where this comes out. How can they be successful in there? Okay. And this is number 17. You simply respond to this. Are these modifications or accommodations? So you respond to those how you see. All right. And again, here are the strategies for the general classroom and what they look like. And I'm going to give these to you also. This is number 18. Except these two, here's a couple extras. You do those first 4 and have an active, have a knowledge of them. Peer tutoring, you've heard of that. how that fits into this. Explicit teaching. Okay, many students with learning disabilities needed explicit teaching. Like direction instruction means that the teacher early states what is to be taught and explains that needs to be done. So I'm going to pop this up. Provide the student with a clear explanation of the skills to be taught, and then precisely teach each step or skill, and relying on the student to make inference from this. So you don't ask students to infer. It's a very weak skill on kids with learning disabilities. So explicit teaching. All right, so you respond to that. Yep. And then promoting active learning. You're going to bring some information about that. Scaffolding instruction. Have you heard of that? Force the student particularly at the initial stage of learning. And so you'll respond to this. And that's right here. Now these executive functions, some of these, you don't have to respond to this as such. This is a brain called Brain CEO. Executive functions are the ability to control and direct one's own learning. Okay. And it gives this here example of executive functions. Can they do? Ability to control and direct one's own, orchestrate the memory, language, and attention to achieve a goal. Again, it seems simple, but it's not for the kid with a learning problem. Can you regulate your thinking process? Can the student verbalize how they organize herself? That's what executive function is. Then this learning strategy instruction also comes out of here. Okay. Not a big fan of this. It takes a pretty high functioning student to comprehend learning strategy instruction. I worked with a few students that this helped them, but I thought we killed a couple kids too, beating this on them about these strategies, that their mental capacity, they were just low average kids that couldn't get their head around this. Who gets their head around this is somebody, what I would say, has a true learning disability that has an average or even above average. We have my oldest son has a really good friend, a close friend, that is dyslexic, and he's one of the smartest kids I know. He blew up the ACT test and stuff. But he's one that this is how he became successful, is all about finding strategies for everything he tried to learn. And he mastered it. That's where this comes in. On our day-to-day, less of that. Okay. And then we move on to this task analysis. Breaks down the complexity of an activity. I'm going to, again, break down. I'm going to assume you've heard of this. You have a little bit. Breaks down the complexity of an activity into easier steps. These steps are organized into sequence. The students taught each step. We think of it more working with kids that have, they're lower functioning, kids that have some intellectual disabilities. We think of it more of teaching life skills. But there's a big place for it in academic skills. Okay. And here are those steps through here. And so I'm going to say this is number 19. Give this a little bit of thought and tell me something you would teach academically with a task analysis, and give a quick few steps on how you would do that. Okay. Technology in the classroom. And what this does here, it just hits a lot of things. Like I showed you already, my technology is the reader, the screen reader. Students who are technology savvy, eager to share the knowledge with others. Technology in the classroom increase student motivation. I think this is a forgotten thing. If students get really good, they get more excited about it. use the internet. Here are some suggested websites. Okay. And how to use technology. And here's a bunch of these things. And a lot of you have been involved in this and have more of that than I do on websites. So here's some things. Support and enhance instruction. Technology as a tool a student complete assignments. Technology as a communication tool. I'm going to do this. This will be number 20, and we're going to end on this one. Said this, that technology can be supported, enhance instruction, complete assignments, communication. You come up with one. What else do you think technology would be successful for, either in the regular classroom with you as a SPED teacher or in the special ed classroom? Like if you've had my technology class, a big thing in our house is the calendar. Is to organize everybody. It's a big organizational skill or tool because everybody can see the same calendar. Okay, and this was on the end of it here. Technology to support instruction, research, interactive survey, Skype, and you've heard a lot of these. Interesting to see where this goes. Interesting to see. I saw here, they asked here one place, should Facebook be in the classrooms? I don't know. Right? They're so vile, some of the stuff that's up there that I don't know, but you are young people going forward. Tell me how this thing's. Here's a huge one that's changing technology or changing schools. This is one that I think is not caught up like I thought it would. This is really a fast-growing one. Okay. All right. Chapter 3.